This is Gemara Nedarim Daf Lamid Vav, and we're holding on the top of Lamid Vav Amid Aleph. But just to bring us back into the Sugya, let's scroll a little bit up to Lamid Hey Amid Beis, as the Gemara asked the Shaila. And this is the Shaila that really we begin by discussing today. Ibayelu, Kayahanim, are they Shlucha Didan or Shlucha Dishmaya? When a Kayin brings a carbon, when a Kayin does an Avodah for us, who is the Kayin acting on behalf? Is it of us, the Bailim, or is it of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And the Gemara explained that the practical difference is in a case of one who is Maider Hana from the Kayin. If he's our Shliach, he's not allowed to do it. If he's a Shliach of Hashem, he's yes allowed to do it. We tried to bring a raya from the Mishnah, that the Mishnah allowed, because the Mishnah said, Makrav Love Kinei Zavin, and therefore, what do we see? It must be that he's Shlucha Dishmaya. Getting benefit. So on that, the Gemara answered, why didn't the Mishnah say Karbonai Stam? The Mishnah seemingly said a unique case. Kinei Zavim Vizavais, which are all examples of Mechusar Kapara. And that's really the answer that we're building off of. And therefore, the Gemara has suggested that only in such a scenario of Mechusar Kapara is the Kayin allowed to bring the carbon for you. However, other karbanos, he would not. Why would the Kayin not be allowed to bring other karbanos? Must be the Kayin is acting as our Shluchei Didan. That is where the Gemara picks up on the top of Lamid Vav Amid Aleph. Says the Gemara, Masiv Rav Simi Barabba. Asks Rav Simi Barabba, Imaya Kayin Zarikal Imaya Kayin. If the person is a Kayin, he's allowed to Yizrk Alav Dam Chatasai V'Dam Ashamai. The Kayin is allowed to do the Zrika of a Chatas and a Asham. Does it say which type of Chatas or Asham? No. It says blanket in Chatas or Asham as we peek over at the Mafirish. You can't really see it. Let's make it that you could see the Mafirish over here. Let's move over the logo. There we go. As you peek over to the Mafirish on the top line, he says the fact that it says it's Tam includes all Chatais and Hashamais, which seemingly indicates not only Mechusar Kabara. You just told me that this whole din only applies for a Kayin, for him, he's allowed in the case of Maider Hana, in scenarios of Mechusar Kabara. But says the Gemara, we see not that way in the Braisa. Answers the Gemara, no Raya. Because what it's referring to, Dam Chatasai Shel Mitzayra, Dam Hashamai Shel Mitzayra, which are examples of Mechusar Kabara. Tersev, in which the Pasuk says, Zoi Sitiyah Tayras HaMitzayra, these are the Tayra of the Mitzayra. And again, from the actual words of Tayras HaMitzayra, similar to what we learned yesterday, we say Bein Gadol Ubein Katan. And therefore, says the Gemara, there is no Raya. You wanted to, there's no Kasha, but rather it's referring to specifically cases of Mechusar Kapara. Continues the Gemara, 5 lines from the top, and says the Gemara, Tinan. Gemara again, so we're trying to stick to our guns, that the Kohanim are the Shluchim of Klal Yisrael, Shlucha Didan. Tanan, ask the Gemara, we learned in the Mishnah. HaKohanim shepiglu b'mikdash, a Kohanim that does pigel. What is pigel? This is an entity that we have learned. Pigel is when a Kohen has a machshava zara. He has the wrong intentions when bringing a carbon. So says the Mishnah, a Kohen that has the wrong intention in bringing a carbon, mezidin, if the Kohen is malicious, he does it on purpose, chayavim, he is obligated. Hashaygigin, what's the obvious implication? The fact that you're teaching me that mezidin are chayiv, the shaygigin are going to be peturin. It's pater ella shapigulan pegel. They're pater because they didn't do it on purpose. They don't have a monetary obligation. However, pigulan pegel, meaning the carbon is possible. That's the Mishnah. Based off of this Mishnah, asked the Gemara, if you're going to tell me, not like the Gemara is suggesting right now, that's why they say kasha, if you're going to tell me that you're acting, then it's all good. No, then it's a kasha. Let's just speak it out. Excuse me. If you're going to tell me that the kohen is a shiach of Hashem, Hainu, then this Mishnah is good shepigul on pigul. Then it makes sense that it's pigul. Obviously, that's a kasha because we're now explaining that the koyanim are shluchah didan. Ela iyamr, it says the gemara shluchah didan. If you're going to tell me the koyanim are our shluchah navai, I might be gulan pigol. Why is it pigol? Lei malei. Let the owner tell the kohen shlucha shevaticha l'takuni v'lo lavasi. I made you my shliach. What did I make you my shliach for? Only when it's going to be for my benefit, not when it's going to be for my detriment. So ask the Gemara that we seemingly see in this Mishnah that the Kayanim are shlichut d'shmaya. Answers the Gemara, Amri, Shaini, Gabe, Pegol. Says the Gemara, Pegol is not a kasha. Why is Pegol not a kasha? Excuse me, we just lost our Gemara. There it is. Says the Gemara, why is, excuse me, we're still having issues that we're losing half the page. Oh, excuse me, we're going to get that back. There it is. Ask the Gemara, why is Pegol not a kasha? Because Shaini Gabe Pegol Damar Kra, says the Torah, Lo Yichashev. Says the Torah, a specific pasuk that it won't work in a case of Pegol. Mikol Makai, which comes to include each and every scenario, and therefore says the Gemara, you cannot ask from the case of Pegol. So the Gemara, difficult to know what we were holding now Lamaskana. Either we could say that Lamaskana we're sticking to the fact that they are shluchah didan, as we deflected all kashas, or we could say that we don't have a raya either way, and that is the end of part A of today's shir. But now in part B, we continue with a gufa which the Gemara now is going to, as we look at the second part of today's Amud, the Gemara now is going to go back into what we just said. Gufa. Omar Rav Yochanan. Hakol tzrichim das chutz mimichusei kapara. Says Rav Yochanan, all karbanos need das anytime you're going to bring a carbon, you have to have knowledge of that which you're doing aside for mechusei kapara. Why? Because one is allowed to bring a carbon for his young children. That is the statement of Rav Yochanan. This is what we saw yesterday in the bottom of Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Asks the Gemara, Elamayata, based on what you just said. And the truth is, let's peek over at the Ran over here. The Ran speaks out that what is the yisoid of Rav Yochanan, that Rav Yochanan just said that you're allowed to bring a carbon for Banav B'nais of Ketanim. The Ran speaks out, Ein Donin Evsher Mishai Evsher. Obviously, it seems that you could be, that's the kasha, is that Rav Yochanan is learning Donin Evsher Mishi Evsher. I really should go up in the previous Ran, in which the whole yisoid of allowing you to bring a carbon for your children must be, even though they're not really shaykh to this carbon, because they are ketanim, but still, Donin Evsher, Mishai Evsher. Again, even though a child who's not physically possible to really bring a carbon, why not? Because a child can't have appropriate das, as their das is not halachically viable. Still, we allow you to bring a carbon. So on that, asks the Gemara, if you, Rav Yochanan, are telling me that you can, yes, bring a carbon, you can, yes, be done in Evsher, Mishai Evsher, we can learn up one case on the next. So therefore, just like I could bring a carbon for a kitanim, even though they do not really have das, I should be able to bring a carbon, chatos chelev being the forbidden fats. A chatos chelev is just the standard carbon chatos for doing an avir. You should be able to bring it for your friend. Like we know that one can bring a carbon. This Rav Yochanan and Rav Yehuda really are two sides of the same coin. Like we know that one can bring a carbon for his wife, who is a shaita, and asks the Gemara, fully articulating the question, Alama Omar Rav Elazar, if one is a mafresh chatos chelev v'chaveroi, Loi asa klum, and that's really the ran that we highlighted already. Why? Because you can't be done after mishi after chatas chaylev. You can't bring from your friend. So ask the Gemara a contradiction, a kasha on Rav Yochanan. According to you, Rav Yochanan, you should yes be able to bring the chatas chaylev on your friend, but we see that is not the case. Answers the Gemara. 1 second. The kash that you just said was predicated on whom? Was predicated on Rav Eliezer. Rav Yehuda, they could bring a carbon for your ishtoi shaita. Says the Gemara. 1 second. Ishtoi shaita echidami. What is this case of a one's wife who's a shaita? If the case is that she ate this chaylev, she did this avera when she was a shaita, when she didn't have das, lavas carboni. She doesn't have to bring a carbon, she has no das. And if the case is that she ate it while she was lucid, she had das vinishtatis, and then she became a shaita. So when it didn't have avera, then he separated a carbon, and then he got better. And then what happens? He loses das. The opposite, excuse me. Carbon vinishtat, and it became a shaita. And then she gets better, possible. Even though right now the person is healed, it's still possible. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. You can't ask a kasha on Rav Yochanan. All kasha on Rav Yochanan seem to be done in Efsher Mishi Efsher. But ask the Gemara, what's your kasha? Your kasha was based upon the fact of Chatas Chilev Shel Chaveiroi, just like you could bring for Ishtoi Shaitish, be able to bring it for your friend. Says the Gemara, you can't. There's no case of Ishtoi Shaita. So there continues the Gemara, you're right. Ela me'ata, about 15 lines to the bottom, the first word line is me'ata, a new kasha. Yavi ad Pesach al Chaveiroi, again, based upon the aside of Rav Yochanan, of Donin Efsher Mishi Efsher, one should yes be able to bring a carbon chatas for his friend. Where do we see this? Shekein oda mevi albanim u'benaisav kitanim. As we find that one is allowed to include his children in the carbon. Alama Amar Rav Elazar. Why did Rav Elazar teach us if Rish Pesach al Chaveiroi Loi Asa Klum, it is meaningless? Now, really, for a moment, we have to go down to the Ran, and the Ran reminds ourselves of dinim that we learned together when we learned the Gemara in Pesachim many moons ago. And let's for a moment look at this Ran. I understand it is getting a little bit late, but for a moment, let's look at this Ran. The Ran says, El Me'ata, Sheyimna, the first white line of the Ran, Lidi Dach, the Don is Efsher, Mishi Efsher, that's the Kasha. Why is it, Lo Yasa Klum, Shzach Yemima Midaitai? What is the reason that you have to appoint the children Midaita? Excuse me, it was the next Ran that I wanted to see, but we first have to read the teretz of the Gemara. So what's the teretz of the Gemara? Amar Rav Zeira, don't ask from Karban Pesach. Why not? Celebeis avois lav de'araisa. The din of celebeis avois, the din that you need to have a mino, you have to be appointed on a carbon, is not a biblical din. Umimai, where do we know this? It says in a Mishnah, Aimer Labanov. I'm shechted to the government Pesach for whichever one of you goes up first. Yerushalayim kivishech l'Rosh Rubai Rishon Rosh Ruba. Once the first child gets the majority of his body, there Zacha b'chalko maskes achiv. He's zoicha and he could be zoicha for his brother Zimai. V'amrit, if you're going to tell me celebeis avos da'araisa, and if you're going to tell me this concept of having a minoi, of being appointed on a carbon pesach is in the Raisa, al bisra kai, umaski lehu, what's going on? You already shechted it, and now when the son shows up to Yerushalayim, now he's being zeich in the carbon. Elalama lehu, elama lehu, damar lehu navun. So why did the father say whichever one of you comes first? He just did that to urge them to have zurizos, to go up to Yerushalayim to get the carbon pesach. Tanami Hachi says the Gemara, this is meduyuk in the Braisa. because Maisa Haya, the kid Mubanim and Isav, Banais, Labanim and Banais, Zuizim, Zuizais, Ubanim Shvelim. There was a story that indeed the girls came before the boys, and the girls were Zrizais. Doesn't say that the boys didn't get, they all got. Why? Because really, there's no din of Minoi Midaraisa. It's all din derabanan. He's just doing a Lazarzon Be Mitzvahs. So for a moment, let's look at the second white line of the Ran. Says the Ran, Loila Mechiyai Danim. Really, you Rav Yechlan are right, and you're yes done in Efsher Mishi Efsher. So why? Over here by Karban Pesach is it different? Umiu Pesach lo matzi lemeidak. Why? The Selabei Savois. Lav daraisa timina toira ein aketanim stricham limanois. Startling din midaraisa, a child is allowed to eat the Karban Pesach without any appointing. Biseh im bnei chavura, one shows up and his children are automatically allowed to eat. You never appointed a child on the Karban Pesach. This whole din of minoi doesn't apply to children. We all that klal. I'm sure we all remember that you could only eat the Karban Pesach if you're money, if you're appointed on the Karban. Hani Mili says the Gemara, that's only one who could potentially be money. And therefore says the Gemara, you can't ask from Karban Pesach. We continue quoting the Mishnah of Nedarim. As through Maisav, the last line of Lamavavim and Aleph, as we move over to Lamavavim and Beis, says the Gemara, when it comes to Truma, even though one was Menadir Hana from his friend, he can't get any enough from him, still says the Gemara, he's yes allowed to take off Truma for him, and the act of taking off Truma is not considered an act that he's giving his friend Hana. So says the Gemara on the top of Lamavavim and Beis, let's ask a fundamental shayla. Asks the Gemara, Ibailu, ha-tayrim mishaloi al shel chaveiroi, sarich daitoi oiloi. And of course, as we keep on seeing, these shaylas, even though at face value seem to have nothing to do with our discussion, our Mishnah is going to be a raya. So if someone is tayrim from himself onto his friend, sarich das oiloi, does he need das or not? Says the Gemara, Mi Amrina, do we say, give this chosulai? I'm coming and I'm taking off truma for you. You have a whole pile of stuff you have to give to the Kayin, a tenth or a Levi, whatever the case is, and I'm going or Midaraisa, you take off a little bit, and I'm doing the act of truma for you. Now, how I'm doing, what's going on? We're going to see in a moment. But the question is, am I allowed to take off truma for you? Do we say, Kim dus chosulai? I'm doing you a favor. It's a schos. So I don't need to have a das in order to do it. Or perhaps mitzvah delay. It's your mitzvah. You have a mitzvah to take off truma, so I can go and quote unquote steal your mitzvah. So a fundamental shayla, am I allowed to take off truma for you? Do I need your consent, your das, or not? Tashma says the Gemara says the Bryce, yes, you have to take off Truma Meiser according to his das. But my asking, what's the case? If you're going to tell me min balakri al shel balakri, what exactly is this case in which the Bryce says that you need to have das? If the case is al balak, there's the toirim and there's the balakri. I am the toirim. I'm doing the act of separating truma. You are the balakri. You have this pile of stuff that needs to be taken off truma. I'm the one doing the act. So do we say ilim min balakri al shel balakri? I'm taking off truma from your stuff for your stuff. I'm taking off the requisite amount to give to the Kayin Levi from your produce to give to the Kayin. Uledaita deman. And whose das are we talking about? Delay. If I'm doing it with my own das, I just walk into your backyard and I start tiffing, I start taking my scissors off your stuff. What in the world are you doing? Get out of my backyard. Who made you a shliach to allow you to do it? So what must the case be? The case must be that the balakri, you who have this pile of stuff that needs to be taken of chuma, you told me to do it. So then the question is, wait, if we have a neder anah, I'm not allowed to do this. Why? Says the Gemara, I can't do this because the reason you can't do this is because you are benefiting him. How are you benefiting him? Says the Gemara, you're benefiting him. Perhaps an interesting way of giving benefit. You're benefiting him by following his shlichus. Again, the fact that you're taking off his truma, that itself is not called the benefit that we're discussing. It's the fact that I made you a shliach, and you made me the shliach, I should say, and I am following your will. So the fact that I'm following your will is called mahani lei. I'm giving you benefit, and how would I be allowed to do that if there is a neder hana? So we're still trying to figure out what is this case of the brayso of Taimes Rumaisav Lidaitai, which will hopefully answer our original shayla on the top line: do you need das or not? So says the Gemara, you're right. Ella, you know what the case is? Mishaloi ashal balakri. We're changing the case. Case is, you have a pile of stuff that needs to be taken off Trumas and Isis, and I go and I take from my stuff to pater up your produce. Well, the the man who's das. Again, the same question. If you appointed me to do this, again, I'm following your shlichos, and therefore I'm giving benefit, and therefore should not be allowed if there's an eder or no. Rather, the case must be I never got your das, I'm doing it on my own. And what's the case? Case is that I am removing my stuff from my stuff to fix up your stuff. Now, here's the raya. If you're going to tell me sarach das, if you're going to tell me that any time you're fixing up your friend's stuff, you need to have his das, then it's called hana. Because if I needed your das, that would mean you told me to do it, and I'm doing what you said, so I'm fulfilling your wishes, and therefore that's called hana. Elalav ein sarich das. So says the Gemara, the only way to explain this price, the must mean that it's my stuff. I'm taking off for you, and I don't need you to allow me to do it. I'm allowed to do it without you telling it, and therefore we have a raya that whenever you do not need das. Says the Gemara, nothing doing, about 15 lines down, first word line is das. Says the Gemara, really, I'm taking off your stuff for your stuff. But the kasha is, if I'm taking off your stuff, then I can't just walk into your backyard without your das, without your consent. I can't do anything in your house. So what's the case? Says the Gemara, you know what the case is? Kedir Rava. And let's understand this, because in a moment we're going to apply this to another scenario. Yavi v'yitrom, a first cousin to that which we've seen in the Gemara in Shabbos, called machabe, einay mafsid. The guy says, whoever wants to take off truma is allowed to take off truma, and that's hachanami. So too in our case, Ba'aymer, he says that as follows. That's going to be the case, but we do not have a raya to the fact, if I'm taking mishaloi, if I'm taking off from my stuff for you, whether I need das. Because what was the case over here? I'm taking off from your stuff to fix your stuff. Well, how am I allowed to do that? Because you announced, kol atayim, whoever wants could take off the appropriate truma. So continues the Gemara, which something that at the face value is going to start off seeming to be unrelated. But we'll see in a moment, it's really the same exact case. Ask Rabbi Yirmiyah to Rav Zera. We're about 20 lines from the bottom of the Amid. Rabbi Yirmiyah, first words on the line. Who gets to choose? Taivas hana is the din that whenever you're giving something to the Kayin, you have the rights to choose, and it's a good thing, because I know if I give this Kayin something, he's going to like me, maybe he'll do a shidduch with me, maybe other things. So I want to give it. So who has the right to give it and to choose which Kayin? Do we say do we say that without the produce of myself, if I didn't take off from my produce, there would be no way to fix your pile. So therefore, it's my produce which is the main event over here. Therefore, I get to choose which kain. Or do we say no? If not for you that you needed stuff to be taken off truma, I would not be able to give anything as truma. So the whole impetus of this truma came from you. So who gets the choice of choosing the kain? Amar lei. So this was a shayla Rav Yirmiyah opposed to Rav Zera. Rav Zera responds, Amar Kra is called Tavua Zar Acha. ve'nosata. Says in the pasuk, and all the entire planting, and your planting, zar'acha, and you shall give. And as the Mefarshim here speak out, that we're equating that it's your entity. And therefore, we see that whose choice is it that it's your grain? Who's your grain? You, the owner of the pile. Eisvei asked the Gemara 1 second. The price that we quoted on the top of the Hamid. If you're going to tell me that you, the Balakri, gets choice, you'd give to the Kayin. That means that you're getting benefit, because now you're getting to choose. Now we know how the two sugis connect. Must be that the Taivas Hana is mine, not yours, because if you, the Balakri, got the Taivas Hana, the right to choose which Kayin, it's called Hana. Amri Loi. Misha Balakri, Al Shabalakri, says Gemara, no, Rai, Uladaiti the Balakri. Why? What's the case? Ba'aymer Kala writes at Litraim, Yavai V'Yitram, as we just saw before. And therefore you can't bring me, there's no cash at all. Tashema, and with this we conclude, Amar Avavu, Amar Rav Yechon, Hamakadesh, Hamakdish, excuse me, not Hamakadish. Hamakdish, someone who gives something to the Beis HaMikdash, one who is makdish an animal for someone else, you have to add on a fifth. Umischaber oiser umischaber, and the one who gets the kapara oiser truma, he's one that affects the truma. This is the nekuda that we're quoting over here. Taivas hana shalai. It's his, the one who separated the truma. He's the one that gets the choice of taivas hana. So a brisa, proving that which we just said, that the Taivas Hana belongs to whom? Belongs to the one that separates the Truma. I'll pick it up from here in the next year. B'siyata Dishmaya.